Let's do it. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Cubs Brawl, the Away Games podcast. This is the big Chicago Cubs season preview podcast, which we're still... I'm still currently excited about the season. I'm going to be for the next 40 minutes for you, I guess. I'm Kevin McCaffrey. I'm here with Adam Amawala, which is normal. What's up, Adam?
Hello. I am also trying to be excited.
Great, good news. And also normal, but more of a special occasion, we're joined by Ken Schultz.
How's Gentlemen, it going? What's up? Good to be back. I have asked my people not to tell me about any communication with the Ricketts.
Good. We'll try. We'll stay in this bubble right now. That's good. Ken has cut off all negotiations, and I think that's fair. And yours extends beyond opening day indefinitely.
Yeah, just for like mental health reasons, it's good not to talk to the Ricketts anymore.
Yeah, it's hard to think of a worse hang at this point. Too.
Would you like some emails?
I've got some really explosive emails I can share. My dad has some thoughts.
Like, I think I like to think that anything that comes out of Joe's mouth begins with forward, must read.
Must read, don't sign Rizzo. So yeah, we're going to do a whole, an overarching season preview of the Cubs here, which is usually something we're very excited to do. It's one of my favorite podcasts every year to do. The Cubs have really managed to suck the fun out of opening day week after everyone really worked themselves up from a bad place into a good place. So yeah, who wants to talk about the events of this week in light of recent events?
Well, I am of the opinion that no one does righteous indignation quite like Ken Schultz. And I feel like it's only right to let Ken fume a bit. Ken, please take it away.
Wow, the pressure is on my rage for the first time in a while, man.
This is a real Avengers and Ken's our Hulk situation, which makes sense. I bet he did the best in science, and he's got the biggest transition between nice guy and tearing down buildings,
and yet somehow no biceps. Can't even get that part right. Yeah, so I'm already coming to, like, if this were my therapy appointment, I would be telling my therapist, yeah, I'm hitting a block already. So
hello, good to see you. I've hit a block. Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess let's
start with it. Let's start with this. The Ricketts, like even before this particular week, rooting for the Cubs the past several years because of the Ricketts family means we have to go through a lot in order to suspend our disbelief that this team is worth emotionally committing to. And mostly we do that because the players are so damn likable. But you think about just how much we have to ignore just from ownership in terms of not even the baseball stuff, not even the weird we're poor bullshit that really should have like Tom moving into the Hotel Zachary like he's John and Moira from Schitt's Creek.
And the team went up, by the way, 5% up to about $3.5 billion in total value during the pandemic year and those biblical losses, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. It's very weird how being poor somehow results in the team valuation going up by $500,000.
While you do nothing, while you fail.
Yeah. Well, think about, just how much we have to ignore from, the Joe Ricketts emails to Todd being the chairman of the Republican Party, to the team hosting Trump fundraisers in a suite in the goddamn ballpark during the election year, to Pete Ricketts trying to lethally inject every other person in Nebraska. And
that's the only injections he wants to give out in Nebraska, by the way.
Eric Sogard is moving there this week.
Yeah, good. Sogard, please do join the Omaha Storm Chasers.
Yes, Storm Chasers. I've been. Not a bad park, although
no, good name
enough for Nebraska, middle of nowhere. Who could have guessed?
Yeah.
But so there's all of that, and even on the field, when they occasionally acquire a Chapman or a Daniel Murphy, where we have to just grit our teeth and go, I guess Laura Ricketts is okay with bringing in a homophobe for reasons.
Mm-hmm.
All of that. We still are fine with emotionally committing to the team because the players that we love are so damn great. The one thing that you should do as an owner, when you make us kind of mentally go through all that shit, you are a means to an end. You are billionaires, and your job is to make sure the players that we want to be around are paid what they're worth. And especially the guy who is most responsible for the turnaround and the past 5 or 6 years, the leadership he has shown to this team. And he's the one that you decide to draw the line in the sand for and insult with 70 million over 5 years when Paul Goldschmidt gets 130. And that is, I mean, we know they're tone deaf, but that's beyond the pale.
It's beyond the pale, and it is it is a level of incompetence that a level of incompetence and detachment that I find disqualifying. And I do think the Blickets, the Blickets, excuse me,
the bloody Ricketts,
the bloody Ricketts are. I do think the Ricketts are number one to blame here, but I also am having trouble finding confidence in Jed Hoyer because right now, what the Cubs have on the books for commitments next year in salary, it's at officially around 70 million, but after you take into account sure buyouts, that drops you down closer to about 47 to 50. It's Miami Marlins range.
Yeah.
So I don't know what Hoyer's operating, but I know it's something. And and one thing you need in the president of baseball operations, I think, is to convince your billionaire owners that this is the no doubter. This is where we start. And then their negotiations begin after Rizzo has been tied up. Because as you say, Ken, very well, this is the heart and soul of this team. This is the heart and soul of a dynasty that kind of never was, but the one connecting piece that should be a no-brainer to take forward. And besides all the intangible stuff, he is good. He is currently good. He is. We can call Mickey Montero, and he will tell us, Anthony Rizzo, he is good. #. And he will continue to be good. And don't give me any shit about him and his back problems when the man plays 140 plus games a year. He is beyond durable. Everyone has health issues. Everyone playing professional sports has health issues. So that's not it. This is the starting point, and it highlights the failure of failing to extend anyone besides Kyle Hendricks. Great job, good work, and David Bodie. We've had years to extend anyone, and the fact that they come at that a supposedly top 5 team in terms of money making payroll, we know that is the truth too. Even though the books are closed, it's the highest ticket price in baseball. We know about the sellouts, we know about the brand, all that stuff. We just saw the Mets offer $340 million to roughly $340 million to Francisco Lindor. They're negotiating around that, which makes sense. When we find that the Cubs offered 5 years and $70 million, and that wasn't even their opening offer, that was a bump up. It's disgusting and disqualifying to a point where I don't know how to have faith in the group running this team right now unless something changes with Rizzo very quickly.
Well, first of all, I mean, if you're going to talk about Rizzo's ailing back, why don't we talk about it in the context of him carrying this franchise emotionally and often physically for the better part of a decade from an unbelievably depressing and bad era of baseball into the greatest moment of our collective lives.
Yeah.
So shut up with the whole back nonsense. He should have been signed to a lifetime deal the second he played on that ankle that was about 3 times its normal size, swollen and black and blue and disgusting, and hit a goddamn Willis Reed home run coming off of that injury. He had no business even being on the field at that point. And look, I think we're all, as much as we love the Cubs, as much as we love the core from 2016, none of us are dumb enough as fans to think that they would all be here forever. But Rizzo should be here forever.
Yes.
It's not really that much of a discussion. Like, I think we all knew, if you had said, like, objectively, do you think that, like, Chris Bryant and Anthony Rizzo and Javier Baez and Kyle Schwarber will all be Cubs for the rest of their careers? We all would have said, yeah, it might be nice, but no, that's not a thing that's going to happen. That's not what this discussion is. And I don't want to let Hoyer off the hook because obviously he has some degree of agency. He has a fairly important job. But I think everything that's going on right now speaks to why Theo got the fuck out when he did. Because I think he probably saw where this was going and was like, I have done a lot. I don't want this to be how my tenure with the Cubs ends. I'd rather Tim Duncan my way out of here and just silently leave before anybody starts yelling at me. It's unbelievably upsetting. And I mean, 70 million over, it's not, you know, when you talk about when Arrieta left and signed with the Phillies, from what we understand, the Cubs made him a reasonable offer. He didn't accept it. and they moved on. And even with KB, if we don't know, it sounds like he wasn't actually officially offered what the Cubs have claimed they offered him. But let's say they did offer him at some point, 10 years, 200 million.
They offered
exactly.
Him, right?
Let's say they did. That is a reasonable starting point. To offer Anthony Rizzo an amount that is less than you should pay, like, I don't know, CJ Crone. I don't.
Well, you just mentioned Jake Arrieta. Jake got 3 years for 75. So what we're talking about is the Cubs offering Anthony Rizzo less than the total dollars over 2 more years. That is the best that they could come up with. And by the way, Arrieta happened in the past. You guys know about inflation, increasing values. We've heard all that. It is just indefensible from a financial standpoint, from a baseball standpoint, and from an organizational standpoint. There's just you can't both sides this thing. Like, I thought it would be inexcusable to not extend 2 of that core group. Pick 2, fine. Well, and then we can deal more year to year with the Haps and the Contrerases in the future. Not extending Rizzo, I mean, for someone who's maybe a little bit pessimistic about this ownership group, I would say, and super pessimistic about them, but a little bit pessimistic about some of the organization in general right now. I did not think this level of indefensible stupidity was possible.
Yeah, I mean, it was assumed, like, up until maybe even this past week for me, that Rizzo was the point for me where it was like, I'm sure, like, even giving them the benefit of the doubt of the very worst case scenario, which is the opposite of the benefit of the doubt. I'm not sure what that phrase would be, but whatever.
Sure. Yeah.
They know enough to know Anthony Rizzo is the guy you got to have around. And we have, by the way, to jump off that for a second, to everything you've said about him being like the key to the next group, bringing the next group into, the atmosphere of winning. We have evidence that when you make the choice that he is the guy you build your team around, that fucking works. It worked well over the past 5 years. Yeah. So that's why you should say, okay, going forward, this is, even though he'll be older, a guy you want to kind of be the leader of the next core. Like that's a good thing. But apparently, giving them the bare minimum of benefit of the doubt that they could recognize that was way, way too much.
Yeah. Yeah, and I said on Twitter, by the way, follow us at Away Games Pod on Twitter and Instagram, but I have tried to hold off from going nuclear about this stuff until it actually happens, or doesn't happen in this case. And it's possible something could pop up, but Anthony Rizzo, by the way, who is also better at speaking to the media and PR than anyone whose job that actually is in the organization, came out and has been very clear without throwing the team under the bus, but seemingly honest, saying where he's come from and obviously everyone knows this is where he's wanted to stay. He's been very clear about that for years. He tried to initiate extension talks last offseason, and they just straight up cold shouldered the dude, and he didn't cut off negotiations after that, and I just want to say there is time. They could fix it. I just don't think there's, as you said, Ken, the opposite of benefit of the doubt. I don't know why we think they would.
Yeah, I mean, if you want a historical comp that might give you a small glimmer of hope, and this is going back in my memory to when they were negotiating Sandberg's extension back in the spring of '92, he had set a deadline of the opening of spring training. And after that, similar to what Anthony said yesterday, after that, no more talk, we're done. And that one, another franchise icon, symbol of what was then the greatest Cub teams of my lifetime, you would think also no brainer. But that one took until I think past midnight of the day he'd set the deadline for them to finally say, okay, yeah, here's a serious offer. And they actually started talking at that point and got it done. Now, that was a previous incompetent ownership group, so I don't know how that relates to this current one. Mm-hmm. But if you want to talk about a Cub icon setting a hard and fast deadline that they got uncomfortably close to approaching before finally tying him up for the rest of his career, that one ended happily.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and Rizzo has said that they're ending negotiations now, but he said if they want to make an offer that is close to what his team believes is serious, he's absolutely listening. And I mean, it's just, I can't remember a contract thing where I saw like more of the internet all on one side. I mean, fucking Barstool is like, what are you doing? You know, to the Cubs ownership. And it's like everyone agrees. There's no one on Cubs ownership side, except for a couple of fans in the replies who I don't even know why you're fans. If you're rooting for Rizzo to not make money, I don't, you know, there's been talk about a vaccine passport. There should be a fan passport now. I want where if you don't believe Rizzo should get that money and stay with the Cubs, I don't want you sitting within 6 feet of me at a Cubs game at any point.
Like, I guess that would be Todd's burner, but I don't think any of them are strong enough to have it.
Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, some of the other moves or non-moves this past offseason, while they were frustrating to us, are defensible because when you think like, I think I'm still upset by the fact that Lester is not going to pitch in a Cubs uniform again, probably. But when you think about Lester not being re-signed, when you think about Schwarber not being re-signed, if the result of those decisions was ultimately that you now have Jake Arrieta and Jock Peterson, you can defend that.
Yeah, it's a baseball move. That even if it's not what you want, that exactly, that is defensible. That I can still be convinced that this can be a competent group of people running the show.
Right. And again, it's like if we knew that the Cubs offered even let's say 5 years, 100 million and Rizzo wanted 5 years, 120 and they just like couldn't find a way to meet in the middle, then you understand why we're where we're at. But I like if I'm Anthony Rizzo and they, you know, dramatically slide a piece of paper across a large marble conference room table and I turn it over and it says 5 years, 70 million, I'm literally laughing in their faces.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And basically the whole internet did, you know, and that sucks because like we were under the impression that we no longer were rooting for that team. We were for a long time and we thought it got better and it did get better. And then we just didn't think it could take a turn this quickly. And I mean, obviously this week has given us, we could have been doing a daily hours-long podcast about a lot this week, but this the Rizzo news kicks us into our season preview because it so directly affects what is happening with this season. And the Rizzo news has changed my opinion about what will happen going forward this year. So in previous years, we've gone through categories. We've picked a number of different individual, we've addressed a number of individual questions to predict for the year to sort of shade things in. And then we do an overall prediction at the end. So I guess we can start it off that way, right? Adam, do you want to kick us off since you are the author of most of these questions? Do you want to kick us off with any of them for our 2021 Chicago Cubs season preview?
Sure. It's kind of a good transition from what we were just talking about, but let's start with comeback player. And for me, I'm going to go with Jake Arrieta. He is literally coming back to the team.
Yeah, in a geographic sense, so you have won.
Yes, I cannot be wrong, no matter what happens. But I also think that some of his struggles with Philly recently are not completely his fault. They are not a good defensive team. I think the Cubs will be a very good defensive team. And again, anybody expecting 2014, 15, 16 Jake is going to be very disappointed. But I do think that, like, if I'm looking at like those later years in Kerry Wood's career where he actually pitched mostly a full season, like if you can give me like a 14-8 with a 3.5 ERA, give that to me all day. And I think that is something that Jake is capable of. I also think that even though he's getting a bit older, if I have faith in anyone to stay in peak physical condition, it's him, despite some of the injury history. And I think he'll like being back in Chicago. So I feel confident about Jake. Also, in looking back through his numbers, do you guys remember what his WAR was in 2015?
2015.
Not off the top of my head, no.
No. Pitchers are weird on WAR too.
8.3.
Yeah, that's disgusting. 8.3. I mean, that's straight up MVP numbers. Yeah. That's an MVP WAR, not just a Cy Young.
You are approaching like 19 teens era pitchers, back when pitchers would routinely throw 350 innings in a season to put up that kind of WAR.
Right. Jake Arrieta was so good in 2015. He was throwing 2 innings an inning.
And still giving up no hits.
Still no hits. Yeah, that's good reasoning, and that's a good call overall for comeback. I mean, it gives you a sense of it's weird because the Cubs did win the division last year. A lot of people forget that. And I for comeback, the first thought I wrote down was anyone. Like I mean, the pitching was good, but obviously, besides Ian Happ and a little bit of Wilson Contreras on offense. You could name almost anyone who's still here from last year, and if they perform as a major league hitter, it would be a comeback of sorts. But
and you know what's interesting about that? I'm sorry to interrupt, Kevin. In listening back to our episode from last year to prepare for this, it's almost like the opposite of what we were talking about last year, because in going into the 2020 season preview, we were like, yeah, it's almost hard to pick a comeback player because when you look at the 2019 numbers, despite the horribly disappointing ending, a lot of these guys had good years. Oh, yeah. And now we're sitting here in 2021 being like, how the fuck did we win that division last year? Right. Like everyone was bad. So it's kind of an interesting flip-flop.
60-game season, I think, is a big part of the answer to that.
Yeah,
absolutely. 60-game season. And in terms of talking about all the instability in the organization, people we don't trust, someone I do trust is Tommy Hotovy. And I do trust what they're doing with the pitching there in a I guess what you would call traditionally unsexy way. But if you make everyone good, it's pretty hot. And I think for me, comeback wise, I wrote down Rizzo. I think, Rizzo did not bomb out as badly as Javi Baez or Chris Bryant last year. But I mean, in terms of a guy who's not going to be worried about a walk year, and in terms of a guy whose peripheral numbers were pretty close to the excellence we've seen from him from so many years, I very much trust Anthony Rizzo to go off. And yeah, that'll be my pick.
Yeah. See if you can detect a pattern to several of my picks for this. But yeah, Anthony Rizzo, I'm on board.
Yeah.
And statistically, I think it backs it up too, because Anthony Rizzo got crushed in BABIP last year. I think it was around 220. And every one of his other peripherals indicated that, he should be having his regular 270 to 280 season. So, and we also know the pattern of Anthony Rizzo years, where early on, he usually has that 1 or 1.5 months where he's just, the way he was for most of the end of last year. And then he'll go off on an ungodly stretch and get his numbers almost immediately back to where they are in his career. So you would figure, had last year gone beyond 60 games, at some point we would have had one of those months where he hits close to 400 with 15 bombs. And then we're not talking about him being a comeback. So, and I want to say this too about Chris Bryant, that he would ordinarily be my pick for this as well. And I definitely want to believe that that's there and could easily see that happening. I just need to see at some point, I want to see you hit the fastball down the middle again.
Yeah.
Like I really, really want to see that for peace of mind. And I believe it's there. I can totally see it happening. I just, in order for me to get on board with the KB comeback train, please just show me that it's possible.
Yeah, and even in the spring games I watched too, it's like that frustrating thing where Chris Bryant works an extremely professional at bat. He's swinging at the pitches he should. He's not swinging at the pitches he shouldn't, and then he gets that mistake and he's fouling it straight back. And it's just like, man, it feels like a year and a half of just that every time. Also, Chris Bryant, who I think we've all thought here was a better defender, especially in the last like 2 years, than the metrics said. There was a change, and I think it was defensive runs saved. Was that the big change, Ken? And turns out we were right. Yeah, he's a very good defender. He's a very good defender, and I'm excited about David Bodie getting an opportunity. But if there is a point when Nico Horner is playing second, if you have an average to a slightly above average third baseman, you're fucking with the best infield in baseball pretty solidly here. Absolutely. Around the rest of the horn. So I think that's a cool thing about Bryant too.
Bryant is such a good defender. He makes the stats say, oops.
Yeah, exactly. He proved that numbers are wrong. Incredible work.
Well, I'm hopeful for this year because I think it's always fun to look back on how wrong and right we were in certain categories. Last year for comeback player, Ken, you picked Johnny Lesta. I picked Albert Almora. I got burned again. Mm-hmm. And Kevin went with Kimbrel. I think merely out of hope. And I think your logic was like, he can't get worse.
Yeah. And he stayed as bad for a minute for the first month. And then he came back. But yeah.
Yeah.
What we learned is don't pick with the heart, pick with cynicism.
Yeah, exactly. This year, it's beginning that way.
Let's move on to breakout player. And last year, I think everybody actually did quite well. So, Kevin, last year you thought that Schwarber and Happ would continue their 2019 breakouts, which certainly
Well, one for
Happ
two.
was,
Yeah.
Happ was true, and that Mills would break out and establish himself as a starting rotation mainstay for 2021. I also
Technically
went with Alec
incorrect, but
Mills. Technically incorrect, but I think the right logic,
I think so too. And
yeah,
he's going to get starts, and I'm happy with him
100%.
getting starts.
And I think perhaps the best pick of anybody in our entire season preview last year was you, Ken, picking Jeremy Jeffress as the breakout player, and referencing the insane WAR that he had in 2018, which was 3.3, and then last year 1.1, which I know pitcher WAR is a little strange, but when you talk about that over a 60-game season for a reliever, that's a hell of a season. That's basically what he did in 2018.
Yeah, and I mean that's ahead of so many position players that put up in the total WAR that they put up for last year. And for all of his reward for a big breakout season, Jeremy Jeffress is now unemployed.
It's a bizarre story that's like too much for us to even get into probably on this podcast, but it's weird. We briefly touched on it before, but a guy who everyone seems to like and now is unemployed for mysterious reasons and an agent's involved. It's weird. We hope things work out for Jeffress, and I hope nothing bad is going on. You know, you never know, but yeah, he was great to have in the bullpen last year, and it seems like Brandon Workman has taken the Jeffress spot, the guy with some high end success in the past, coming off a bad year.
So, who wants to kick us off with their breakout player for this year?
I can
take it away.
Yeah. I was tempted to kind of go along the pattern last year. I originally wrote down Jason Adam, looking at how highly the team thinks of him, and clearly the stuff is there. And with the Cubs pitch lab, you see the results they have with it, that there could be like a Jeffress level, maybe 1.5 WAR year or something over a full course of a full season. Like that would be phenomenal for someone who's going to be getting mostly the 7th and 8th to start the season. And then after the last game of spring training, I thought about it, and, I'm going to go Adbert Alzolay.
Yeah.
The thing about that last outing, and he didn't have a good spring overall, but kind of watching the way it ended, especially that last game against the Dodgers, like watching that unfold as the game started, I saw the Dodgers had brought their A lineup to Mesa to play the Cubs. And I thought, oh, geez, this is going to slog. Like, because even before it starts, when you see the Mookie Betts, Seager, Bellinger, Muncy, just masher after masher, and all of them just grind and work out at bats, like you see exactly why that is so intimidating over the course of 162. And watching Adbert go after them was inspiring. Like, you could see the way that he was approaching was, okay, you're bringing your best. Great. Here it is. Let's see what you got. And he set him down guy after guy after guy. And Ross didn't let him go long. It was only 3 2/3 after Ted Barrett fucked up a ball strike call.
Yes, Ken's in mid-season form. He's got the umpire's full name and remembers what was fucked up. I love it.
One of the most overrated umpires in the game, Ted Barrett. It's a great reputation. I have no idea why. I can only guess because he's a preacher and they don't want to offend God.
We're starting a new petition. Have Lil Nas X umpire opening day.
Or send Ted Barrett on a stripper pole down to hell. Either way, that's fine.
No other baseball
if you thought Dale Scott...
Dale Scott's not going to be happy with me for after this pod, but
that's okay. Dale Scott, we're a pro Dale Scott podcast too now.
But so I don't know how Adbert is going to be like second or third time through the order. Like that's probably going to be a bit difficult. But I mean, just seeing the fact that he approached that Dodgers lineup in that way and was able to go through them, like they didn't have a chance in those first 3 2/3 innings. That makes me think, at least mentally, he is major league ready now. And that's exciting to see for someone who's got his stuff. And as you say, from what Justin Steele has told you, like everybody in the organization knows this stuff is there. You combine that with that kind of attacking mentality. Let's see what you got. Let's go.
Absolutely. The fact that the stuff is nasty, other pitchers think the stuff is nasty. The thing we heard about the Cubs way, sort of leaning into character mattering, which sometimes has been laughable in between with some of the decisions they've made. But it seems like Alzolay is one of those guys where he has some high end physical ability. This is a guy who you think of as a potential, if he's hitting if he's doing what we think he can, this could be a number 2 starter. This is a guy who has extremely good stuff, added a pitch, and Justin Steele told us when he was on the podcast that he will always bet on Adbert. If you ask him about who's going to break out, who should we look out for, he's going to say him every time. And if you just follow him on Twitter, this guy's extremely positive that he's
the real director of morale.
He's the, I would say Adbert Alzolay is the actual director of morale for the Chicago Cubs, and I so hope you're right. And he was one of the names I wrote down for this too. Can't wait to see him. The only thing I'm worried about is his all-time high in innings because of weird injuries every year, basically, and then last year, obviously, his all-time high is 120 innings, which came in 2016 in South Bend, and it's going to be tough to build him up. But I think if we're piggybacking him with some other starters and having shorter outings sprinkled in there, I'm very hopeful for him too. Adam, who you got?
I'm going to give you a pitcher and a batter, both guys who had negative WARs in 2020, which again, shortened season. But my breakout pitcher, I'm going to go with Trevor Williams. I think he very well could be the starting pitcher equivalent of Jeremy Jeffress last year, where it's like, coming off a very down year, a couple of years ago was very good. He had a fantastic 2018. And I think he also might be traded. I'll get to that later, but I think that he's also been mentioned as somebody who will benefit from the ball no longer being juiced. I think that's going to be an interesting wrinkle as well. It seems like he's happy to be in Chicago. That never hurts. I'm sure it wasn't like overly fun to be on a horrific Pirates team. So yes. I'm pretty high on Trevor Williams. And I'm also going to say Jock Peterson, because while he was impressive in the playoffs, if you look at his regular season numbers last year, they were brutal. I mean, he batted like 190. So I'm not drinking too much of the Kool-Aid in terms of spring training numbers, but he's looked very good in spring training. I also like him as a dude. I think he's going to be fun to have around. And so I'm just kind of hoping that he has a good year. But I actually am digging him as the everyday left fielder. It'll be interesting to see how he does against lefties. But, throw Marisnik in a couple times. But I think Peterson's going to be good.
I think Peterson is kind of almost a more extreme example of what I talked about with Rizzo earlier, where he'll have that stretch of just being brutal for a long length of time. Like even sometimes half a season will go that way. But he will also have stretches where he locks it in and crushes. And over 162, you'll probably see that even out a lot more than over 60. So I like that pick a lot. And he's also fun, if for nothing else. I just like seeing the way he rounds third on the home run trot and like leaps.
And we've seen it 8 times in the spring.
Yeah, I could get used to that. Like, so bring more of that fun to the team. And if you want to do the making it rain gesture every so often in a home run trot like he did during the series a few years ago, I'm on board.
Yeah, he seems to be a lot of fun. His number 1 statistical comp at this point in his career is Kyle Schwarber. So statistically, you see what they're looking at there. Trevor Williams, I think, is a very interesting call too, Adam. And if specifically, if you want to hear more about Trevor Williams and why to believe in him beyond his numbers from a couple years ago and his numbers in the spring, Brendan Miller over at the Cubs Related podcast has done a great job diving deep into the shape of his pitches, all the spin rates, the angles, the extension, the weird extension from a weird low release point that Trevor Williams gets. So I'd encourage you to go listen to that. But I think those are both really good calls. And in terms of, and I'm also cool with Peterson. This is, I think, like one of those allowances you make to get a better player, saying we're going to play you every day when, we don't know. I mean, we don't know how he's going to do against lefties, but we literally have no evidence he'll be good. We do have stats, and he's been terrible against lefties his whole career, and that's fine because he does other things so great, and he's a competent to decent center fielder too, and we've seen how those do in Wrigley. Like basically, Dexter Fowler, I think, is a comparable defensive player to Jock Peterson, and in left he's going to be plus. So I think that's all great.
I also think real quick about Peterson that he's been told that he will start most every game, including against lefties. But I don't think anyone guaranteed him you will face every lefty. Like, no. If it's late in the game and Josh Hader is pitching, I don't think you're not going to see a pinch hitter if it makes sense. Like, right. Just because, and there are more lefty relievers than there are starters, if I'm not mistaken. I think there are, right? It seems like that is the thing that would be true. I'm basing that on no information, but that feels right. So,
Right.
I think that'll be interesting too, like in late inning matchups.
Yeah. No, I think, and like that's, oh, go ahead, Ken.
Well, most teams have, one or two lefties in the bullpen at some point, and there are teams that don't have a lefty in the starting rotation, like the Cubs. So.
Yeah, and if this is part of what got Peterson to come here for the money he did, this is the right sort of signing and gamble, and I'm all about that. And for breakout, I think all your guys' picks are great. I'll throw in a David Bodie there. I just believe in the skill that the man hits the ball harder than the vast majority of people in the major leagues, and that he hasn't gotten he's gotten fairly consistent playing time, but I think having the belief from this manager and the way he's worked himself up from never a prospect guy into being a major leaguer who hits the ball harder than I think it's like 80+% of the league at minimum. But I mean, this is sort of a thing with Jorge Soler had exit velo numbers when the rest of the numbers weren't there, and it took a little while, and then he broke out. And I'm not saying Bodie's Soler. I'm not even saying Bodie's Justin Turner, who's a comp that I think we've seen with Bodie before. But I think it's going to be interesting to see him get a chance here, and I'm a Bodie believer.
I'd take a Justin Turner comp. That'd be fun.
Yeah, exactly. All the way up until you test positive, and then in the last game of the World Series, if we can get it up to the winning the World Series part with the Justin Turner comp, that's great. And then you just mask up. It's fine.
Sogard is the one that would be the comp for that, I think.
Yeah, Sogard is the comp. Man, we could have done eight podcasts in 7 days over the things that have happened this week. But yeah, that's my breakout. Adam, what's our next category?
Well, the next one's a bit of a downer. We got regression. So who do we think is going to regress this year? And
there's going to be a downer on this podcast? Wow.
At least I think we are the friendliest, most upbeat downers that you're likely to find across the podcastosphere.
I will tell you, last year we all went with pitchers in this category. I went with Kyle Ryan. I just felt he had outperformed his stuff in 2019, and I guess unfortunately that was right. I thought he would be 2020's Randy Rosario, and in 2019 Ryan had a 1.2 WAR, negative 0.2 in 2020. Ken, you went with Kimbrel, which unfortunately was also not wrong, and then Kevin, this is maybe the only knock on you from the entire season preview episode last year was that you felt that Darvish was more of the first half of 2019 guy than the second half, and I think we were all very pleasantly surprised that he turned out to be that guy, and hopefully for the Padres will continue to be that guy.
Oh yeah,
I don't think that was a bad prediction.
No, I thought he was. I mean, I didn't think he was going to be bad, but I thought I think I said somewhere he would be in that low 3 ERA range as opposed to extraordinarily dominant. But that was literally wrong because he was extraordinarily dominant. I mean, he was a should have won the Cy Young guy, and he's. I mean, the Padres rotation is so friggin' loaded. And he's starting opening day for a new team with a loaded rotation. And I think that's all you need to know about him. And when you look at the Cubs roster right now, all you're thinking is it's a decent roster. You're just missing one high-end starting pitcher that you would surely start in a playoff series. And then, I mean, if only we had one. But yeah, anyway. So regression, I wrote. So for comeback, I wrote anyone, and for under regression, I wrote can anyone. Regress,
it was hard to come up with someone. Yeah,
regress more than they did because I don't want to just look at. You end up looking at the roster and just calling out people to regress. And this isn't. We don't want anyone to regress, but you're just calling out people who had good years. So I'm I don't know. Does Hayward go back to the Cub he's been the rest of the time?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, that's and I don't even fully believe that because looking at his swing, even this spring, I feel like I've seen a little bit of him holding on to the consistency he had later in last year. But I mean, that was really, it's Hayward, maybe a little bit of regressing. I don't quite think he'll be offensively what he was last year, but I think he'll be closer to that than he was the 2016 Cub. And I'm Jack regressing from spring, but I mean, I think Jack's going to be great. So this is a hard one.
Yeah, I had Hayward as well, and it was the exact same logic. I mean, he OPS'd at 848 last year, and I think his tenure with the Cubs has shown him to be more maybe 100 points lower than that. I think that could be more of what we see. And also part of what his value is, a huge part of his value is how great he is defensively. and he's still a young guy, but like there is one extra year of age, and I think as people get older, you start to see that defensively in terms of the amount of ground they can cover, how accurate the throws are. I'm fishing here, if anything, but I think if anyone's going to regress a little bit, it's probably Hayward, just because he was better last year than he has been for most of his time with the Cubs.
Jed Hoyer.
Ah, yes. Wow, you did it. That's Ken's right. Yeah. Go ahead.
In part of the discussion we had on our Facebook chat yesterday, I kind of mentioned Jed Hoyer's having a Larry Himes ass offseason, only without trading for Sammy Sosa, which is the worst kind of Himes offseason you could have.
Right. Trade for an early 90s Sammy Sosa and we're fine.
Zach Davies somehow I don't think will be that.
No, although I'm excited about him too.
Yeah, I mean,
it's going from a Larry Himes offseason to a Larry David offseason. All we need is that Curb Your Enthusiasm music to just slowly zoom into Jed Hoyer.
Yeah.
And sadly, Jeff Garland is going to be a part of this one too. It makes no sense that it's a Larry Himes ass offseason either, but he's approaching it almost like Theo leaving is now giving him the opportunity to put his official Jed Hoyer stamp on the team. So he's getting rid of the guys, or he's lowballing guys that he figures are not going to be Jed Hoyer guys going forward because he wants his own vision. Only every one of these guys is a Jed Hoyer guy too. Like you played a giant role in getting Anthony Rizzo,
especially
multiple times.
Yes. Yeah, and imagine if Epstein and Hoyer had been like, "Nah, we don't really want to fuck with Javi Baez. He's a Hendry guy."
Yeah, I mean but that's part of being a really good executive, is recognizing when you inherit talent of that caliber and seeing, okay, maybe there's something there. We might have to refine it, as they did with Javi for a couple of years. But you saw the result of that. Like that's putting your own ego, sublimating it, and putting the team as a priority. And that's what you want in an executive. It's one of the reasons why Theo was so great, is that he saw that there was so much talent in Baez and in Wilson Contreras, and he gave them the opportunity, and they took it, and they shone, and all the power to them. But it mystifies me.
I think that's such a great point, and I'm still in a little bit of wait and see with Hoyer, but all you can judge on is what we've seen to this point. And yeah, Hoyer was part of the best Cubs front office in history. He was a major part of it, so we think, right? But he has not been the guy. And as you said that, talking about a front office exec who comes in, has a lot of talent to work with, and we don't know that he's quite this way yet, but if he becomes so obsessed with turning over the team to put his own stamp, quote unquote, on it, the first name I thought of who wanted to do that was Jerry Krause. It was a late 90s Bulls, a guy who was obsessed with needlessly antagonizing the stars he had, and then always wanted to build his own vision beyond Phil Jackson, beyond his championship winning coach manager, beyond the stars he had. And all you need to know about that is the end of the 90s and early 2000s Bulls. So I think we need to see a lot from Hoyer to not have that the runaway winner here, I think.
I would agree. No, I'm not here for any Tim Floyd slander. I think he was a brilliant coach.
It just needs one more break.
Let's jump to a presumably a more positive or fun category, bold prediction. Last year, you guys went with the second base category. Kevin, your prediction was that Bodie would be the most productive player at second base rather than Kipnis and Nico. Ken, you thought Nico would grab second base by the horns and be the key hitter in the lineup and referenced his contact skills. And I thought, yes, a key hitter. I thought that Rowan Wick would be closing games by mid-August. So the intention was right, but not the player. I'm going to go ahead and jump in. Go ahead.
If Nico Horner got a barrel for every time I liked one of his Insta picks, his WRC plus would be over 200.
Yeah, we just need to form some synergy there.
I'm going to make some version of the same exact prediction, which is that Brandon Workman ends up being the closer for this team. I have not liked what I've seen from Kimbrel in the spring. I've not liked what I've seen since the Cubs signed him. And I would love to be wrong, but I think that Workman, given his closing experience and the fact that he's looked good in spring for whatever that's worth, I could see him being that person to step into that role.
Yeah, Brandon Workman has shown like he could be dominant out of the closer's role. Like the year before last in 2019, when the Red Sox put him there, yeah, he was filthy. And Kimbrel, I mean, at least this year we have the latter few weeks of spring where it seemed like he figured something out. But yeah, overall, I can't say that there's any reason to have confidence in him yet until, again, he shows us.
Yeah, it's funny, as you said, leading into this category, Adam, like, well, maybe this will be more positive. No, not for me. My bold prediction, it's sort of, they're related to each other. One, I just said that I think the Cubs are, this is a little positive, I guess. I think they are going to sell from first place. I think they're going to be in first approaching the deadline. And until the business with Rizzo over the past week, I still thought, there's a spoiler on what I'm predicting, but I still thought the Cubs had the roster to win the Central Division. And they do today. But I thought they would win the Central a few days ago, and now I feel like I don't feel that way. I think they're tipping their hand in a way that they're planning to sell, and I think they'll be selling from first place. So that's my bold prediction. The other one, related to overall philosophy, they might set the all-time record for most qualifying offers dished out at the end of the year. Without having any accepted. I've counted 4 that I think they could make, and that I think they won't find trades that they want, and it's guys expiring they're going to give qualifying offers to, and it's just going to be the year of compensatory picks. Wow, boner alert. Did anyone get really excited about that?
I mean, that's kind of along the lines of what the Darvish trade was. That was essentially Zach Davies and 4 qualifying offers.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's the pattern.
Exactly. So that's mine, yeah.
Yeah. So I have the Marquee Sports Network is going to lose so much money that Joe Ricketts will be forced to end his membership in the Proud Boys. Can't afford the dues.
I've seen how the Proud Boys look. I've seen what they're wearing. It doesn't seem like the dues would even be that high, but that is too bad.
And it's interesting that every time you try to queue up Marquee on a phone or tablet, the announcement just says "stand back and stand by."
Whenever you get static.
Their like actual slogan this year is "We get it." So yeah, you could interpret that as yeah. As a more positive bold prediction, let's go with Jake Arrieta throws his 3rd no-hitter.
Yeah, ooh, I love it. I love it.
I think that he's shown during the spring that the breaking ball is there. There is something there with that breaking ball. And he's not going to be the Jake, obviously, of 8.3 WAR seasons. Like that is far in the past. But he's going to have starts where when he's got the command of everything and that pitch is locked in, he's going to be damn near unhittable again. And, sure, why not? Let's have one. Do you remember, like, when Maddox signed back in 2004, that maybe once every 6 or 7 starts, he would have everything put together? And you'd have like one of those vintage Maddox 90 pitch complete games. Like that's going to be Jake Arrieta this year. I think that every so often he will touch that old greatness, and that game is going to be just such a warm feeling to watch.
I think that's a great comp. And if I was gambling, which you can do in some ways on Thrive Fantasy, and if you use the promo code Away Games on Thrive Fantasy, you get a free $20 with a $20 deposit. And if I was somewhere to gamble, which I was actually when I got my vaccine at the Horse Track Casino in Queens the other day, I would absolutely put a bet on Jake Arrieta throwing a no-hitter because the odds would be long. But you can absolutely see it happening. And with the stuff we've seen, like we've said, the curveball looks really good and the velocity is higher than you would expect at this point in the year. And he's got an excellent defense behind him. So I think that's a great call.
And congratulations, by the way. I do love the idea of people doing the most responsible thing possible at a horse racing track.
Absolutely. It's definitely the most responsible thing I've ever done at a casino.
You emerge a winner regardless.
Yes.
All right. So we only have a couple of categories left. We're going to wrap it up. Let's go with team MVP. Kevin, who you got?
Wilson Contreras again. And I don't think it takes a ton of explanation. we see that it seems like he has actually gotten good at framing, not just okay. And if he's a good pitch framer and his arm is the best in the league, and pitchers seem to like working with him more and more every year, and he has as much offensive ability as any catcher in baseball, I think that leads to, as I said last year, a profile that not only could be team MVP, it could be the league MVP if he puts everything together for a year.
Love it.
I like it. Ken, what do you got?
Anthony Rizzo.
Yeah.
This is going to sound like, to anyone who doesn't know me, this is going to sound like the hottest of hot sports takes, but you guys both know me, so to you, this is obvious. As a sports fan, Anthony Rizzo means more to me than Michael Jordan. Like,
yeah.
And it's particularly me, it's because the Cubs rank so much higher than every other Chicago sports team in my mental priorities, but it's true. And I said this during the 90s, that whenever the Cubs win a World Series, it's going to mean more. That one World Series will mean more than all 6 titles put together, like by an exponential factor. And Anthony Rizzo is, to me, the biggest reason that they were able to build a team that gave us what we all wanted. And yeah, at this point, especially after the events of this week, I can't pick anybody else but him for team MVP.
I think the actual answer franchise wide of the Cubs MVP is Anthony Rizzo. I think that's just the truth. And
he's Ernie Banks for our generation.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And Anthony Rizzo is sort of, his career is sort of the embodiment of what it's been to be a Cubs fan, but played out to its most optimistic, I don't want to say conclusion because it's not done yet, but high point, I guess. This is a guy who came in, was traded. He had promise as a prospect, looked like he was for a minute a bust in San Diego, got traded to a team that was awful. And then he found himself becoming the leader of a team that was awful, a doormat, actually reaching his promise with that team, maturing with that team, taking it to a championship. And I just thought about this now too. Anthony needs to get that fucking ball back from the Ricketts that he gave for the last out. Take it back. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, he as a career is like what you hope the Cubs would be. It came from doormat to the pinnacle, and he's there's never been a more important Cub.
I agree. Yeah. And I mean, we all have our reasons for becoming Cubs fans, or those first few important players. I mean, like Sammy Sosa is the reason that I fell in love with the Cubs. Anthony Rizzo is the reason that I love the Cubs. Mm-hmm. Like I look back on Sammy Sosa the way you look back on like a relationship in college where you're like, I thought that was love. That was so toxic. What was wrong with me? Like, that was not healthy for anybody.
I look back on Sosa, like the relationship where you're like, wow, I thought that was love. That was a lot of fun. That was
right.
That was great.
In Fuck, Marry, Kill, you fuck Sosa, you marry Rizzo, you kill the Ricketts. That's how that goes. Rizzo's a great pick. Contreras is a great pick. We're all going with big name guys here. I'm gonna go with KB. I've been wrong here before. I think he does figure out how to hit a fastball again. That's my hope. I'm trying to will this into existence as much as I actually believe it. So I'm gonna go with KB. And as he seems to be the last few years, I think he's just like tired of everybody's shit. And there's some money to be made for him, as there is for a lot of these guys. So I think there's a good chance that he has a good year, and also he really was not good last year. So it's both a bounce back and MVP. And let's see, we're getting to the end here.
Yeah,
this one's a bummer. One player the Cubs will trade for or trade away. I think Trevor Williams might be gone just because they have starting pitching depth. That's not like a super sexy pick, but Kevin, it sounds like you think, and you're probably right, that the Cubs are going to be trading from first. Who do you think they're going to get rid of?
I think Trevor Williams is the Feldman / Mahalam. Basically, he's the starting pitcher. I think his upside's probably higher than those guys were too, but he's the starting pitcher you acquire for a year, you see how you can fix him, and then you flip him at the deadline in a season that you don't super intend to win. So I would be happy to have Trevor Williams for the year, but I'd be happy to have him for the next few years, I think. But I think he gets dealt. I also think Craig Kimbrell, if he's good, gets dealt, and because you could slide in Workman or Jason Adam. And the Cubs do have depth in the bullpen now. Going down, you could almost form 2 bullpens I'd feel okay about from what the Cubs have going on right now. So that would be one I'd understand a little more. And then, I mean, you could even, I'll stop there, but it could be plenty.
Yeah. Same reasoning as you guys, but I'm going with Zach Davies just because that would be the perfect denouement to the Yu Darvish trade.
Yeah, it sure would. Yeah.
Yep, that sounds right.
Trade him back to the Padres for one even further down the top 30 list of prospects.
Trade him back to the Padres for a 12-year-old. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's Henry Rowengartner.
Get Henry, sure.
We found out Jed Hoyer's plan. Find the next Henry Rowengartner.
I think Henry Rowengartner threw harder than Zach Davies before he broke his arm.
But the movement, not the movement.
Zach Davies has to break his arm somehow.
All right, finally, let's wrap this up with record and prediction in the Central, and I guess let's expand that to like how far does this team go? Ken, you want to start?
Yeah, 86 and 76 I wrote down, and I think kind of similar to what you were talking about earlier, Kevin, that I was feeling them just because the Central, I mean, nobody's really shown effort until the Cardinals brought in Arenado. But after this week, I can't really give them any benefit of the doubt. So, 86 and 76, and second place, they missed the playoffs.
I think 86 and 76 would have been pretty much exactly my prediction a week ago. And I still do think this team as constructed is, I would pick this team as constructed to win the division. Why I'm picking them 81 and 81. I'm trying to think what record would piss me off the most. Put you in a place in the draft where you're not really getting anything high end. Also, not really be sniffing the playoffs in the last couple weeks of the season. So 81-81, and I think that because, as I said, I just think the Cardinals in getting Arenado, I don't think the Cardinals are better than the Cubs right now. I think what they're showing you is they intend to be better. They at least don't intend to not be better, it seems like the Cubs are doing with this Rizzo business. And it all changes on that. You lock up Rizzo before the season starts. You go in positively, not just for this year, but into the future, led by that person. And that is just, and with that gone, I've got Cubs 81 and 81. I'm going to say that's third in the division because I think the Brewers will be 82 and 80, and they will miss the playoffs.
Well, every podcast needs a homer, and I'm going to be that guy. There's
Good,
no reason that I should believe in it, but
Yep.
I'm gonna throw a little 2003 record at you. I'm gonna go 88 and 74. Cubs win the division by a game over the Cardinals in a dramatic last weekend finich.
I mean,
Nice.
God, best case scenario.
They find the magic again. Yep, I'd be fine with that.
And honestly, if you can somehow, if you're contending and you decide to swing a deal for us starting pitcher that would start in a playoff series, you could get in the playoffs and do some shit. Like that is on the table for this year. You could technically do that.
It's entirely conceivable that this team is good and could do something like that to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
It's just that they've done everything in their power to convince us otherwise. And why are you doing that? What is the point of running a major league team if that's what you're going to do with it?
I'm imagining just like playing a video game and just dealing stars at the deadline and just like, what am I here for? Just negotiating like video game players down? Where is the fun in this?
It feels like the Cubs are entering a season that you would see in like a poorly written baseball movie where they're like, guys, if we lose one more game, we're losing the franchise.
Yes.
So you can't lose.
Yeah. Cool.
That's it. That's the season preview episode. You guys got anything else?
So we're to be continuing this for overall MLB season preview on my podcast on Friday, the Three Strikes You're Out podcast on the Outsports podcast network. Just search Outsports in your engine. You'll find us there, and we'll be talking about the rest of baseball on Friday.
And where can people find you?
I am at Ken Schultz _ on Twitter, at Ken Thin Guy on Instagram. And I write for Outsports and Baseball Prospectus. Check me out when my stuff gets published there.
Follow Ken Schultz there. Follow us at Away Games Pod and listen to that the three of us talking on Outsports about the full Major League Baseball season preview this Friday. And hey, that'll be a day after the Cubs play, we think. So that's fun. Let's start the season. Thanks, everybody.